What's going on, everyone? My name's Eric, and today on the channel I have the pleasure of showing you this 1960s to 1970s Gibson SG bass. This came in for a project restoration, so I wanted to make this video and walk you through what I did, some things to look out for if you are buying a vintage guitar or if you're actually working on a vintage guitar like this and you want to keep it original, which is kind of what we have to do for the most part in this case. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, that's kind of it. It's not every day you see one of these actual original Gibson basses that are from the 60s or the 70s, like that are in your hands like this. You might see it in a music store, but being able to like spend a lot of time with it like this, like as we're doing in today's video, is really sweet. Let's get into it. Alright, so from what the owner of this bass told me, he got this guitar from his dad, and by the sounds of it, he just wants to get this thing back up and playing. The thing is, like, this guitar has seen a lot of miles, and by the sounds of it, it was just stored like in a house in the guitar case for so many years. Like, I think the house flooded at one point, and ultimately we want to get this bass guitar ready so it can be like actually played on stage, because that's what the owner of this wants. This was his dad's, this is his now, and you know, he wants to like, you know, show his dad like, hey, like, this is your old bass and it's still rocking. So that's what we want to do in today's video. I have the bass fully taken apart right now, and when I first got this, I plugged it in. I wanted to hear if it was making sound, and it was. The first thing that I noticed is that the volume and the tone pot on this bass, they were pretty scratchy. When you are working on guitars or basses that are this old, from the 60s or the 70s, you generally want to keep everything as original as you can. So when you are working on these volume pots here, you just want to get a little bit of that CFC cleaner or a contact cleaner. You spray it on the insides of the volume pots. You then just rotate them like this. This is actually going to clean them out. And you got to do that a couple times just to make sure that all of that contact cleaner is getting on the actual track that the volume pots sit on this. Now, if you spray contact cleaner in, you run the pots back and forth, and you're still getting that scratchy sound, you are kind of in a fork in the road at that point. Do you want to replace the pots with some new stuff, potentially affecting the value of the guitar? That's up to you. It depends if you want to actually keep this all original or if you just want to get this bass going. If you don't care about replacing the original parts, then go ahead and do that. Not my recommended move for a guitar that is this vintage. If you want to keep all the original parts and you want to actually make this work, what you want to do is actually take the volume pot apart. You kind of have to split those little tabs that are on the backs of the actual potentiometers, open it up, run some sandpaper over that track. That's going to scuff it up a bit and get rid of any sort of dirt and debris that's been in this. But if your guitar or bass is in as rough shape as kind of this one was, it went through a house flood or something pretty rough like that, you might have to do that. I had to do it on a couple guitars in the past. Not too bad. It takes a little bit of time and skill, but again, it is a good skill to learn how to do, so then you can actually save your original electronics on your vintage guitar. I was pretty fortunate. I managed to get some CFC and contact cleaner in here, running it back and forth on the pots and the input jack here, and we are good to go. There is no noise. The pickup is actually working as well. That's also another really great sign that I don't have to go down the used rabbit hole and try to find an actual pickup for this thing, because I don't know, it's an old 60s, 70s bass. I'm not really sure of who would make an old Gibson pickup that is like retrofitted to something like this. If you know, let me know in the comments below. Now moving up to the fingerboard, just like every other guitar that comes into the shop here, what I do is I take a little bit of that quadruple zero steel wool, get some of those Music Nomad fret guards, and then I just clean off those frets ever so slightly. And then, as you can see, we got those frets looking back to life. Hydrated the fingerboard with that lemon oil from Music Nomad, and this looks brand new. It's really great. Generally, if you keep your guitars in pretty decent shape, you won't have to do a crazy amount of work. I've seen some really rough guitars that have like the whole fingerboards are like pretty destroyed with like gunk and grime. Yeah, you're gonna have to do some major TLC to that. But in this case here, you know, you don't really have to do a ton just to get your guitar looking and sounding like pretty awesome. Another thing you want to make sure with some of these vintage guitars is that all of these screws that are holding down different components are actually going to be tight and actually functioning properly. Something that you might have to do is put a little bit of wood shims into these screw holes. Again, some of these screws have been in and out of these basses or these guitars multiple times, and when you do that multiple times, the screw hole just gets a little bit bigger every time. A couple of extra pieces of wood shims or some wood scraps, throw them all in there, and then the screws are going to hold much better than they did previously if you were having issues with the screws holding into the guitar body. Let's move up to the nut here. Again, same thing. This is the original nut from like the 60s or the 70s. This looks like it's in pretty decent shape. I could replace this if I really wanted to, but again, it seems like this bass is just going to be in standard tuning with some regular gauge bass strings. We're not going to have to go super crazy on this, so we're going to keep it. If I do have to replace it, I'll let you know and I'll show you how we do it. Something else I had to do was change the truss rod nut on this bass guitar here. Now, this kind of threw me for a loop, and I wanted to share this with all of you here. The original truss rod nut on this was stripped, so I couldn't adjust it to correct the neck bow. There was a good amount of neck bow on this guitar, so initially I thought, let's just adjust the truss rod, but of course I go to do it and the truss rod nut is stripped and my truss rod wrench is slipping. So at this point I'm in a bit of a fork in the road. I'm thinking, is the actual truss rod that's in the neck, is that hung, is it done, or is it just the nut that is stripped? I took the original truss rod nut off of this base, and simply what you do is you just keep loosening it, and eventually this truss rod nut is just going to spin right off of the metal threaded part that goes into the truss rod. I then looked over the truss rod nut, and yeah, there was a couple parts that were stripped out and had seen better days. Again, you know, this guitar is from the 60s or the 70s. The next thing I had to do was make sure that the truss rod threading was actually going to match the new truss rod that I was going to put on the guitar. So after a lot of research, I found out that the Gibson truss rod like nut and the threaded part that goes in here, that is going to be 10/32 of an inch. So what I had to do was take that original truss rod nut, I then went to Home Depot and then managed to size up that original Gibson truss rod nut with that section of the store that actually has all of the threaded parts where you can see if the nut is going to fit on the particular threading. Went and did that and then confirmed that yes, this is a 10/32 adjustment piece. I ordered some new Gibson style truss rod nuts and then these just simply screwed on. I threw a little bit of that 3-in-1 gear oil on here just to make sure that first initial threading with the new part is going to go on there perfectly. I then started adjusting the truss rod with that truss rod wrench, and then I could see the neck was actually straightening out and actually being able to have like a bit of a back bow. So perfect. Truss rod works. That's a huge win in my books. If the truss rod wasn't working, I would probably have to then just hand this off because I don't have the skill at this point to totally rip a truss rod out of a neck, and you might just have to kind of hang your guitar as a cool wall piece at that point, in my honest opinion. I do want to give a shout out to Gibson for kind of like keeping this consistent over the years and not really changing this, different like threading or hex sizes or anything like that. It's the same threading and the same truss rod size like since day one, more or less. And this piece is also extremely easy to change out if it's stripped or anything, unlike maybe some other truss rod nuts that go right into the neck of the guitar. Last but not least, we got to deal with the bridge. And this is the bridge that I have here. It just sits like this on the base. The strings wrap around the back end here. This will adjust like any sort of wraparound bridge. You have the 2 Allen wrench screws that are on the sides here, which will then dictate the intonation and actually help you intonate the bass properly. The only issue with this bridge is that there's actually a hole in one of these saddles. Now, I tried to solder it and I tried to like kind of repair it as best as I could, and it's not going to work. So I then thought, well, maybe I can kind of like spot weld it. And then I thought, okay, that's going to be a lot of heat, and the last thing I want to do is actually destroy this bridge. Like, this is where I would say like we got to get some new parts. Now, trying to find an old like Gibson OEM bridge is not an easy thing as well. Some of these old OEM parts are like almost $1,000 because it's an old vintage Gibson part. They just kind of run for good money. And even trying to go down the rabbit hole and contact all these different music stores and suppliers, like the bridge like for this and this particular sizing just kind of doesn't exist. Until I managed to contact my friends at Hipshot and they actually have a replacement for this. Alright, so here is the Hipshot Supertone. This comes in 2 and 3 point mounting. Obviously this is the 2 point because we got the 2 mounting points right here. This is for like these SG or Les Paul style basses. They also make a 3 point version of this, which is going to work for some other style basses that have another mounting point down here or right at the top here. When you get the bridge, you also get all of the proprietary hardware to get this mounted onto your vintage bass. And yeah, it seems like this is the only bridge that we can actually use. So again, shout out to Hipshot for coming in super clutch and providing the bridge, being able to actually get this bass up and running for the customer. So let's get the bass guitar on the bench and let me walk you through how we install this. First thing we're gonna do is simply unscrew these original mounting posts. Next thing you wanna do is leave those original bushings in the bass guitar. There's no sense of pulling them out. If they're in there good, just leave them in there. Hipshot's only gonna give you the actual mounting screws that will go into them. They're not gonna give you bushings that will go in the body. So leave these in here. 2 mounting holes right here. As you can see, this is actually lining up perfectly. And even trying to find a replacement bridge, as I said earlier, it was pretty well impossible since the sizing never really matched. Let's quickly look at these bridges, and as you can see, the Hipshot just has way more mass and there's more material here. This bridge is gonna affect the tone in a really positive way just because there is so much more mass on this by comparison to that original Gibson bridge. Hipshot will give you 2 sets of mounting screws because some of those bushings that are in the original Gibson basses, they are gonna have different thread sizes. Hipshot has done their homework and they're making sure that you get all the parts you need to be successful when you're installing your Supertone bridge as well. They also give you a bunch of Allen wrenches, so you can use that, and you're gonna adjust these all the way down. These anchors are here to hold the bridge in place. There's another set screw on the back here if you need to change the bridge angle or anything like that, especially for intonation. And you have the intonation screw on the back where you could slide the saddle forwards or backwards in relation to how you need to set the intonation. These 2 points here are where you adjust the overall string height. This back screw actually will lock the saddle in place, so you can move the string over to the left and to the right. This part that I'm pointing at with the Allen wrench right here, this is going to move left to right, and this will actually help you dial in how you like your bass strings to feel, whether you want them kind of fanning out to the left or more narrow on the inside or right in the middle. Then you can actually lock that in with that back screw right there, and then your bass is fully locked in. Overall, really happy with this bridge. Feels solid, looks really solid, easy to function and easy to operate, just like every other Hipshot product I've used in the past. Once again, thanks to Hipshot for sending over the Supertone 2-point bridge. This is an awesome bridge, and I definitely recommend it on your old vintage bass. All right, now here's the finished Gibson SG bass from the 60s or the 70s, all done. Lots of trials and tribulations, especially with the bridge and with the nut, and hoping the truss rod wasn't stripped or like broken. And of course, lots of learning through this whole process, which I want to pass on to you all. And of course, this is all cost-free because it's on YouTube. This thing turned out really great. I'm super happy with it. It sounds great. This bridge is massive. It's already resonating like crazy when I'm playing this bass unplugged, and I can only imagine how great it's gonna sound when it's fully plugged in. But yeah, like, very happy with how it turned out. This could have gone way worse, especially with that truss rod. I was really worried about that. But yeah, turned out really awesome, super happy with it. And of course, I want to share it all with you because at the end of the day, I hope you can learn something from this. And if this inspires you to like dive into like trying guitar repairs on your own, or like trying to help out a buddy fix a guitar, that's what it's all about at the end of the day. Passing on some knowledge, learning through this stuff, having some fun, and obviously like showing some cool guitars and basses along the way. So if you like this video and you learned something new, let me know down below in the comments. I look forward to reading all of your comments, especially if you have been in a situation like this dealing with a vintage instrument that you've had to actually rebuild from almost scratch. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. Got tons more guitar restoration and guitar related topic videos on the channel. And if you are a returning subscriber, make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss a single video that I upload. Thanks for checking this out, and I'll see you next time.